Hello everyone, I'm Ron Berger. Welcome to the Astrology News Report, an alternate view of world events as seen through the lens of Vedic astrology. Today is March 11th, 2018. In this special report section, I'm going to analyze the effects of the Mars-Saturn conjunction of March and April 2018 for each of the 12 rising signs. Mars is transiting in sidereal Sagittarius from March 7th until May 2nd. While in Sagittarius, Mars teams up with Saturn, a much slower-moving planet, which has been in Sagittarius since October 2017. Vedic astrology considers both of these planets to be first-rate malefics, in other words, capable of doing harm. Two malefics transiting in one sector of the zodiac is a problematic situation. Mars is the planet of action and force. Saturn is the planet of delay and restriction. Mars is the planet of aggression and conflict. Saturn is the planet of suffering. Put the two of them together and you get the energy of enforcement and punishment. On the plus side, the restrictive energy of Saturn combined with the forcefulness of Mars can give concentrated action, which, if used consciously, is good for making a big effort with the potential of great accomplishment. As a transit to your natal chart, this double malefic combination is detrimental to the significations of any planet that it may affect by conjunction or opposition. For instance, if you have your natal Venus in Gemini, Mars and Saturn will be opposite. Therefore, the significations of Venus are damaged. Finding compromise and agreement with others will be much more difficult. If you have your natal Mercury in Sagittarius, you will likely have some problem in communicating with others. Saturn, the planet of circumstances, will compel you to speak in Mars-like fashion, in other words, harshly with force. Now I will go through the zodiac and talk about what you can expect from the Mars-Saturn transit based on which houses get affected in your natal chart, as determined from your rising sign. According to Vedic astrology's techniques of interpretation, you should also consider your moon sign as a reference point for analyzing the effects of a transit. If you are Aries rising, Mars and Saturn are transiting through your ninth house of long-distance travel, religion, and higher education. This combination is good for making a big push in your college studies, like cramming for a test, but it's not a good time for taking a trip and is detrimental for relations with your father, teacher, or guru. From the ninth house, Mars and Saturn are sending their energy into your third house, which makes everyday activities and achieving your desires much more difficult. Third house people, in other words, your sibling and or your neighbor, could be having problems, or your relationship with them will suffer in some way. For Taurus rising people, the Mars-Saturn combination affects your eighth house, where it puts pressure on your partner's finances or any financial arrangements that you have with others. This is the house of big changes and chronic problems. Mars plus Saturn is forceful with a non-negotiable quality. This energy pattern means you have to be extra careful during March and April because circumstances may arise that compel you to make a big change. With two malefic planets opposing your second house of personal finances, family, and materiality, it is likely you will experience some suffering in this area of your life. Both the eighth house and the second house signify money. yours and others, so finances will be a concern during March and April. If you have Gemini as your rising sign, Mars and Saturn are transiting in your 7th house of partnership and opposing your natal ascendant. This is an important transit causing negative effects on your relationships, your spouse or significant other, business partner, and clients if you have any. 2 forceful negative planets in your 7th house give power to another representation of this sector, the direct opponent. This would not be a good time to be engaged in a competition or legal matter. The Mars-Saturn transit energy strengthens your opponent and inflicts damage on you. Since the ascendant also represents your body, this combination is not good for your health. For Cancer rising people, Mars and Saturn affect your 6th house during March and April. As the house of difficulties and disease, this part of the chart is problematic to begin with, so the addition of more negative energy is not welcome. Mars is the planet of infection and injury. Saturn is the planet of longevity and suffering. Not a pretty picture. On the upside, you can utilize the Mars plus Saturn energy to help you to focus your efforts on therapy and other forms of self-improvement, and for solving problems. Simultaneously, Mars and Saturn oppose your 12th house, which makes dealing with the 12th house people, strangers, foreigners, institutions, problematic. Leo rising charts get to experience the Mars-Saturn combination in their 5th house of romance, children, speculation, and investments. This double malefic won't help your relationship with your lover or child, who may be going through difficulties during these months. Speculation and investment should be put off for a more auspicious time. The 5th house is the house of creativity and spiritual practice. The concentrated forcefulness of Mars plus Saturn can give your creative efforts a boost and help you put more energy into your spiritual practice. By opposing the 11th house, this planetary pattern is detrimental for 11th house relationships, in other words, your friends and associates. Nor is it helpful for your 11th house goals and ambitions. So best to not harbor high hopes for this area during March and April. Virgo rising people get Mars and Saturn transiting through the 4th house during March and April. Mars, the planet of combat, is not welcome in the 4th house of domestic activities. Saturn adds more pressure, so home life will be a bit tense. Your relationship with your mother and what is going on in her life will be less than delightful. On the other hand, you could put the Mars-Saturn energy to work on a home improvement project. Mars and Saturn aspecting your 10th house will put stress on your professional life, as well as messing up your relationships with your superiors, your boss, and or government authorities. If you are Libra rising, then Sagittarius is your 3rd house, which means that Mars and Saturn are affecting your house of desires and initiative. This could be a useful transit for you, since the Mars-Saturn combination is good for determined effort. It would be best to have some kind of project that can absorb this kind of energy. But for the people and relationships of the 3rd house, this is not good. Siblings, close relatives, your neighbors, any or all of whom could be having a rough time, and or your relationship with them will suffer. Similarly, the people of your 9th house, opposed by Mars and Saturn, in other words, father and or priest or guru, will not be doing well. Other significations of the 9th house, such as religious observance, travel, the pursuit of higher education, will be under pressure as well. For Scorpio rising people, the Mars-Saturn combination will affect your second house and the opposite sector, your eighth house. Both of these areas have finances as a major component. The second house is your personal finances. The eighth house concerns your financial arrangements with others. Both will be under stress from the influence of this double malefic. The second house is also the house of family, which won't benefit from either Mars, the planet of conflict, or Saturn, the planet of restriction. Mars plus Saturn transiting in the second house of speech requires you to use commanding, harsh speech. One possible positive use of the Mars-Saturn energy would be to concentrate on working extra hard to earn the dollars. Since this is the house of material possessions, you might be intensely focused on some material acquisition. Sagittarius rising people get to experience the Mars-Saturn energy in a very personal way, since this double transit will be influencing your first house of self and body for these 2 months. This can be highly energizing, but it's not especially cooperative. There's a potential for great accomplishment and simultaneously a problem collaborating with anyone else, because the planet of conflict and the planet of restriction are simultaneously aspecting your seventh house of one-on-one relationships, making harmony and compromise all but impossible to attain. So, best advice is to work on your own. On the plus side, Mars with Saturn transiting in your first house does send lots of negative energy to your direct opponent, giving you the advantage in any battle. For Capricorn rising charts, Sagittarius is the sign in the 12th house, the house of the subconscious. A double malefic transit in this sector can be especially troubling, bringing on a sense of anxiety and dread without necessarily having an obvious source. The 12th also signifies strangers and foreigners. Your relationship with these people will be stressed during these months. Mars transiting in the 12th house is said to signify an attack from a hidden enemy. In other words, someone working against you from behind your back. By sending their combined aspect to your 6th house of employment, Mars and Saturn will cause problems in your job and in relationships with coworkers or with your employees, if you have any. If you are Aquarius rising, the Mars-Saturn transit hits your 11th house. Malefic planets transiting through the house of goals and ambitions give you a lot of energy, making you very determined, even ruthless, in the pursuit of your goals. But this transit is not good for the people of the 11th house, your friends and associates. Similarly, the aspect of Mars and Saturn landing on your 5th house of romance and children won't be beneficial for romance or for your relationship with your children. Mars and Saturn opposing your 5th house of speculation and investment and creativity makes these months a poor time for moving ahead with any speculative adventure. And lastly, for Pisces rising charts, Mars and Saturn are transiting through your 10th house of career, professional success, and community activities. This energy package can be used for making determined progress in your career or for fighting your way to some higher status or position. However, this sector of the chart also stands for superiors, your boss, and government officials. Your relationships with these people are likely to be difficult during these 2 months. From its transit through your 10th house, Mars and Saturn will aspect your 4th house, which is not going to be good for your mother, nor for harmony in home life, and may even threaten your home and assets. Okay, so there you have it. True, mostly it's not a pretty picture, but just remember it only lasts until May, when Mars will separate from Saturn as it moves into Capricorn, which sets up a whole new pattern in the zodiac. And now, in parting, a reminder that you can help ensure that this video blog keeps going by making a donation. Just click or touch on the donation card you see here, which takes you to the donation page. Thanks, and until next week.